Hi, Thomas. Tell me about what you've been doing recently.
Well, lots been going on. I'm involved in a couple of things as I'm always involved in. Most prominently, I have started a new role as a lecturer here at a private university within organizational psychology, and with a focus on change leadership at the moment, communication and the other things. But outside that, I'm writing my second book, which kind of focuses this time on a bit of an alternative take on facilitation, trying to rattle the cage a little bit. And here and there, some exciting projects with, among others, yourself. There's always something going on.
Yeah.
I think that's a brief overview.
Jolly good. Listen, I wanted to talk to you about innovation and team culture, because what I notice, and I don't know what your thoughts are on this, which is why we're having the conversation, is that when I'm in Scandinavia and I'm talking to companies based in Scandinavia, they have an instinctive understanding of innovation and the need for it in their teams. And I think a lot of the stuff that you get involved with, Thomas, is partly because there's already this kind of subculture in Scandinavian psychology that is innovation is yes, you've got to have it. And I think a lot of companies around the world don't have it. They don't have that instinct. What are your thoughts around that?
I can relate to what you're saying, but I think it's a bit more nuanced, because I think you have to distinguish sectors. I think particularly the private sector is full of innovation. I can now mainly speak of Norway. I have a little bit of insight into the other countries as well, but mainly my view comes on Norway as well. And here the private sector is very innovative. And I think one of the reasons for that is the system makes it extremely easy to innovate. So you're basically encouraged to innovate. It's easy to start a company. It's you get a lot of support for innovative ideas. So people are there's a lot of incentives there. Plus, what I also noticed is that a lot of innovation circles around a common purpose. So it's not that you innovate into the blue, but for example, making environment protective innovations, right? So there you have a kind of a common purpose, and people go into these different directions, or how to best use the digital space, right? So there's in a way this common frame around it, and within that everything's allowed. But then that differs from sector to sector. So for example, the state sector public sector is very rigid in many ways, because it's bigger, it's heavier structures, there's the idea of innovation, but the structure doesn't necessarily promote it. So there's a bit of this contradiction happening here, but I can agree with, and I can really find myself in what you're saying. Like, there is an instinctive need, drive, and wish to innovate that you will always find. It's just executed differently in different spaces.
And for the benefit of the audience that we get following this podcast, what contribution do you make into those organizations?
They differ, of course, but I'm usually an external person that's called in to design and facilitate processes. That can be everything from how a team works together to an innovation sprint to just new ways of working together. And my contributions are different in that sense. On the one hand, I claim that I work innovatively when it comes to the facilitation space. I don't necessarily use traditional frameworks. I always design from scratch the things that I do, but I also always play with what's already there. So I basically come into a room and I try to really work out the strength of a team or a group that I'm working with. I use psychological processes that define our cooperations, our collaboration, the way we interact with each other. I use them to illustrate and help the team to see, okay, here we have maybe blockers, here there are pitfalls, this is what we're not using well enough, here we have resources that we have maybe used wrongly, doesn't really work for our team that way. And I'm also not shy to give my outside perspective. So I'm not one of these facilitators that stands back and said, I see all the things, but I'm not saying anything about it. I maybe say it in a debrief. I think that's a wasted opportunity. So I come in also at points, not telling them what to do, but saying, like, if they're open to an external perspective, this is what I observe. And that I also feel gives an added value, because it's too easy to just guide the group, because they have the same views, right? I mean, they've worked together. They often have the same views on things. They sometimes have really locked positions, and I just try to break these a bit, and rattle the cage, as I also said before, here as well.
And in terms of, the starting point for this, a lot of your clients, I guess, they're going to have to make a decision. I'm going to spend some money on this.
Yeah.
I'm going to work with an external hire to help me to do this. What is normally the driving force behind that justification to do something different?
Often they have come to a point where they feel now we need help. This is usually the starting point. It doesn't necessarily have to be me, right? I'm very open in outlining my approach to this, because what I often observe is that clients want help, but then they play the safety, or they take the safe road, in the sense that they want help, but they want everything. They want to know everything before. So what am I going to do? How am I going to do it? What is going to come out of it? And my answer to all these three things is I don't know. And I can't tell you, because it's first I need to know your situation. Then I need to sit down and think about what could we do. Then we come into the room and actually start doing. This is when I understand this is what's really possible. And I cannot tell you before what comes out of it. But what I can tell you is that we will address topics that are difficult. I will help you identify what your blockers are, where the pain points are, and we will go there afterwards if you continue to work with me. But I will not give you an agenda on how I'm going to do this, because this is also not really doing you a favor. This is basically predefining a process and then again locking you into something which I don't want to lock you into. I want you to come into this with an open mindset. And when I usually lay out my philosophy and my approach, they immediately know we want to work with this guy or we don't want to work with this guy. And if they don't want to work with me, that's fine, because then we're anyway not a match. And that's completely okay. But I've also really over the years learned that the more honest I am about who I am and what I can offer, the more it benefits the client and me ultimately, because we very quickly know this is a relationship that works or it doesn't. And and for them to spend money, of course, that's always a risky choice. And that also comes with, I'm not making promises, right? I cannot tell you that we've fixed what needs to be fixed after our work together. But what I can promise you is that we will go where it hurts. We will identify what blocks you, and then you can decide what you want to do with it, whether I'm still involved or not. And that usually works as an honest feedback for them to make a decision whether that's okay or not.
But I guess, they're going to look for a net gain. There's got to be some sort of aspirational outcome to say, this is the line I'm looking for. If you get beyond that, that's great. But there's kind of minimum viable spec in terms of, what I really need you to deliver. What is that tending to be?
I usually lay out very simple. Like when you do this, I ask them how much time have they spent on this already, and how did they get to the point where they actually now understood that they need external help. And then I'm saying, like, this is what I cost for that period of time. And this is way less in time and in money what they've already spent on. And it's like you're at a point now where you cannot continue. So for you, the question is, do you want to continue spending more time circling around the topic and maybe lacking that external perspective? Or is that short-term investment for you worth it? Well, you save time, you save money, you have somebody else who guides you, and we make way bigger steps than we make usually. And again, I cannot promise what comes out of this, because I'm also very clear, like my role in this is an external guide, if you want. So I'm with you in this process. I share my perspectives if you want that, and I'm with you in this process. But the responsibility for content and for the change is with you. Because this is often what I see that especially younger consultants or facilitators, they don't make that clear enough. They take a lot of responsibility on themselves and try to fix everything. It's not my job to fix things, because I'm not there. I'm just coming in to lay out. It's a bit like the first comparison comes to mind is almost like a doctor, right? It's like, you want to be healthier. I can tell you and help you find out what needs fixing, but you need to do the behavior change. You need to work on your changes. And making that clear to the client is also often taking away the conversation from this, like what is my net gain out of this? It's like if you do what we conclude in these meetings and follow up in your way, what best works for you, there's no doubt there'll be a net gain. I cannot put a number on it, but there will be a net gain if you're aware of your responsibility and your role in this whole process, and my role on the other side.
It's interesting, really, isn't it? Because again, in England, as you know, we don't really have a local shrink that we go to every week and every month. You know, that's kind of not really a part of our culture. In America, of course, in North America, that's quite common for people to have somebody that they're going to unburden with and share their ideas with, and their emotions and their problems. And I guess in some respects, you're that in a business. You're kind of helping that team to kind of bind. But does it tend to be, you know, what are you unlocking? Are you unlocking the ambition? Are you unlocking the workings of the team, how they function together, or is it the relationships? Or where do you think, where does this play?
What I definitely help them understand is that there's always a space of maneuver, right? A space of leverage, as I call that, because often when we're locked in this situation, it seems like we have one choice, maybe two choices, right? But that we don't like that. We don't like to have just two choices that are presented to us. We like to have our option spectrum. We like to have a feeling like, oh, we can actually play with different ideas here. This is what I help them unlock. And that comes from, for example, the angle that no, I've yet to meet a team or a team leader or a company that is aware of all its resources. I haven't met that yet, because we when we talk about resources, we're so quickly into the materialistic, the tangible things. But there's so many intangible things that we have that we're not using. Like my favorite question for the listeners is, and think about this, do you know how many languages are spoken in your teams? Nobody could ever answer that question to me because we don't speak about it. But a language, for example, could be a huge resource for a company if opening a new business in a country where they didn't have access to, and all of a sudden you have somebody in the team that has been there, speaks the language, etc. Right? So these are small things. So that's where I start. I start them help understand what resources and how many they have actually available. Then I help them understand that these resources don't have to be used just as we're used to using them, but we can actually play with them. We can reinvent them. We can look at them at different angles. And when we are there, we're already in developing our options. And that's the moment when they understand, okay, here is something we can do something about. And maybe to add one more thing, what also is a crucial part in that is that we have a habit of really of framing our problems in an unhealthy way, because we often frame our problems as something that we are detached from. So the problem is this and this, right? This is often a phrase that I hear, which kind of makes me have a very big distance to the problem. Now I try to help them reframe this and start every problem situation with like, what can I or what can we do about ... Because that the moment you ask that question, if the answer is no, you're looking at the wrong spot. So you have to automatically reframe until there's something, because you always eventually get to a point where there's something you can do. And this is your zone of leverage. And this is kind of what I try to help to unlock with clients.
Got it. So, I mean, on the 24th of October, Thomas, I'm looking to do this event with Generation Digital Magazine, and that's going to be focused around digital transformation leaders, and really how do they take AI, data, all these different things coming in and actually just do something with it? Because a lot of organizations, I think, have almost become overwhelmed by what things they could be doing, to the point that they just kind of go paralysis, I can't do anything. But I want to build in, from your side of things, the conversation between culture and attitude and ambition that drives all the technology selections, all the ambitions around projects and things. Because I think a lot of organizations I'm talking to are also missing the mindset change. And I think that one of the great quotes that I like is, technology isn't transforming, it's technology transforming people that's happening. So it's not this question of modifying the technology. We need to modify our behavior to embrace it. And I think what we've seen with AI recently is that the technology has gone so far so fast that actually we can't comprehend its possibilities and how to absorb it. There's just too much to imagine what those possibilities could be, and yet it seems out of reach to a lot of people. So what are your thoughts around this link between team structures, personalities, cultures, and digital transformation, that bridge there?
So it's an essential bridge that is often ignored. I mean, what we must not forget is that we've undergone huge changes now in the work life in just the past 5 years, starting with the pandemic, right? When you think back before the pandemic, many companies struggled with digital transformation. There was an inner resistance, and all of a sudden the pandemic was really speeding this up. People understood. People had now really a comprehension. Okay, why is this actually beneficial for me or for us as a company? So that was the first shift. Now with the increased digitalization, because that was of course inviting a lot of people to think in that space, and all of a sudden there were lots of new innovations, and it really sped up in terms of like how the digital space evolved. And now we are kind of at the AI. What is important when it comes to team culture, and this is often forgotten. So one thing is the product evolvement, which is now what I call the digitalization space, right? That evolves. There's innovations as we speak. There are new things happening. But what happens on the culture side is often left behind, because there's the assumption that we're already in it. We'll anyway learn how to run. But especially when it comes to AI, and this is I have had this through conversations, and I'm on the side where I'm kind of a bit more reserved in AI. That doesn't mean I don't respect it. I don't find it's absolutely impressive what can be done, but I don't know enough about it. It's as simple as that. So people don't know enough about it, and what happens when we don't know enough about it? We're afraid of it. It's always the same, right? Yeah. So it becomes the unknown. It becomes uncertain. So, and this is where emotions play into the game. And we've had this conversation before. You know that I'm really a promoter of making space for these emotions. And don't forget, with all the technical processes that are going on, businesses that have to run, at the end of it, there's still, at the core of it, there's still people. And that's how we function, right? Emotions is a language that we have. But if we're not getting space, what we will do is we will almost, like in a childlike behavior, go into resistance and hold back. Exactly the same as was before the pandemic with the digitalization. It was this, I don't feel seen. I don't feel respected for that. I'm actually uncertain about this. I don't know enough about this. I don't know what this means for me. The information overflow you mentioned in terms of like, what does this mean for my job? Am I going to be redundant? Do I have to completely reinvent myself? So all these questions are circling around. And that's where team culture is important, because team culture can actually balance that. You can, in a team, you can find a way to address those things, to have an open discussion about it, to assign roles, there's so many things you can do within a team to keep up with that, with the speed of the product development.
But do you think, I mean, part of this comes down to the fact that maybe organizations have got either the wrong people, or they're missing sorts of talent and people. They haven't got the diversity perhaps that they need, or the breadth of thought. Is there a kind of a missing element here that essentially is the elephant in the room that people don't talk about? You know, they've got the wrong people.
Maybe. I don't say that I'm not sure if people are the wrong people, but I think it's really about, I wonder if anybody has ever sat down and said, like, do these people match the needs, right? And simply when that's a conversation, what does that do with the people as well? That's the other question. If that's in the air, like, am I the wrong person? It makes me also scared. But what I've learned is that, and here we're now into kind of in one of my passion topics, which is disruption. And that the beauty with the word disruption in the English language is that it means an origin and it means an effect. So you basically, when you have digital transformation, it's a disruptor, right? That's disruption for lots of companies. The same could be said, for example, about neurodiversity, which is another passion topic of both of us, which is also a disruption. But it's only perceived as a disruption if the system cannot handle it. So if the system, either through the resources, right, the right people is one of the options, or through habits, like the way the system works, the elements in the system works, in this case, the people, the way they work together, that could also counterbalance the disruption. If that's not in place, it would also be felt as one. And the moment it's felt as a disruption, it has a negative effect on the company, on the mindset of the people, the well-being. It doesn't really benefit. So you have to work on that cultural aspect, in the sense of, you might have to look at the people side. Do I have the right people? If you can change that, you can actually say, like, well, how are we working together? Are we actually making space for different perspectives? Are we actually challenging our assumptions? Those are some of the habits that I've identified that are very prevalent everywhere in companies. And I think it's important to take time to evolve and strengthen these habits, because when you're then confronted with a disruption, you already have the habit of how to deal with difficult situations, and makes it kind of easier to absorb it and not feel it so strongly as many companies do.
But maybe, I guess, talking about disruption, Thomas, one disruption is when somebody comes up with an idea. in a business.
Absolutely.
And really, I guess when we talk about making space, I mean, isn't one of the things that you need to make space for is for failure, and for not shooting people down that quickly? Because I get the impression, people say, well, you can't ever have a wrong idea, but again, the challenge I think with ideas is once it's out there, whatever that idea might be, it takes its own energy, and it can be distracting, it can be disruptive in a negative way. So, what are your thoughts and your experiences around how do companies deal with that, manage with that, or embrace that?
That's a crucial point for me. I don't believe in failure as a concept as such. I think failure is just simply an insight. This doesn't work, right? If you go back, and you also know I love to learn from children, it's like they don't look upon the things when they try something, they don't look upon it as failure. The moment we put in failure, it becomes also a psychological effect that we feel we haven't succeeded in something. So it's basically putting our efforts down. Yeah. That's one thing. But back to your question is, I see many different ways of dealing with that. The most innovative companies, going back to what we said initially about Scandinavia, there I have a feeling that there's a lot of space for ideas. And ideas are very critical. And this is the other side of it. The people coming with ideas, they have to deal with that. It's very critically dissected. Like, what is the idea? Does it work? Can we try it? They give space for that. But they're also smart enough to not make only space for that. So they have this like, I put now random numbers on it, but roughly, let's say 20% is ideation, trying, failing, however you want to call this, and 80% is the core business running. So they have this lifeline running. They also then, when an idea works, they transfer it into the system that's already working. So this is one way of going about it. But I completely agree with you. Ideas are very disruptive. If you don't, again, if the system is not set up to deal with it and to embrace it.
And it's also that I know with Google, with their 20%ers club, they basically allocate 20% of their time. All of their employees can do if you like, a passion project, as long as it's related to their discipline, their subject. And that, again, is a 20 to 80 ratio that Google works to. In our business, we have Mondays to do innovation and 4 days a week we work, so I think that makes sense. So is there a question here of, do companies need to gift time to innovation and ideas in their business and really start to think differently about how they're managing time? Because obviously, if you haven't got the time, you can't create, right?
Yeah, time is one thing. The other thing is, I think everybody needs to be included, because that also that I've also seen that the innovation team becomes an exclusive club. It's like the smart people that innovate, and the rest keeps kind of the ship afloat. That shouldn't be the case. Everybody should have their chance to play a little bit with the concept, and not everybody has to be and this is also a misconception I often meet. Not everybody in an innovation team has to be an innovator. There's different roles needed in innovation teams. That there's actually also the person needed that has the very conservative view, just to really counterbalance. Because I'm also, my mind goes often completely wild. So I need the people who drag me back to the ground and say, like, so, but what can we do with this? And I think what companies often struggle with also is that if they have a successful idea, what do we actually do with this idea? And that I see so many ideas dying, and not because they're bad ideas, but because they didn't know how to actually work with the idea when it's successful, how to make something of it, how to change the existing system to work with that idea. And the third part in this little block here is we hardly ever talk with what's already going really well. And I noticed that a lot in crisis work when you do these reviews along the way and discuss with people, and they easily go into, this needs to improve and we need to get better at that and that. Yeah, we're great. But we're not so good at, like, what is actually really working well. Because the problem with being too too innovative and too uncertain is that you miss the things, and you miss out on what keeps you alive. You miss out on those things that got you through the pandemic, for example, which are crucial insights as well. So it's not always about changing things. It's also understanding, what do we need to keep? What is actually really good? And and that kind of reduces a little bit the space for innovation as well, which makes it a bit more focused.
Well, listen, Thomas, we've already got to 25 minutes in.
Yeah.
What I'm going to say is, if anybody on the channel wants to hear a bit more about this, then go along to the 24th of October, and you'll hopefully hear Thomas talking again on this subject. So, Thomas, listen, thanks for that for today.
Thank you very much for having me. It was always, as always, great.
And we will talk again very soon. Thank you.
Looking forward.